I'm going to grab a little device called Helping Hands. It allows me to place objects in there. It's just a pole with 2 alligator clips on it. It allows me to place an object in there, and it actually acts as an extra set of hands, which I do not have. And I'm going to just put that adapter plug in there. Going to zoom in and help you get a good view here. Going to add some solder and just tin the edges of those adapters there, or those leads there. Just put some solder on each one of those leads. I like to melt it on there so it's all melted on there. You can see how the solder's on there. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the leads for this power adapter. Now please note, this power adapter is unplugged at this point. Do not work while it's plugged in. I only plugged it in to test the voltage, and then I unplugged it. Okay, we're going to take a big piece of heat shrink tubing. I'm going to cut a little size of it off. And I'm going to put that around our wire. Now that's a real big piece, real wide, but we're going to need at least one wide piece to get around the adapter plug. Then I'm going to use a thinner piece just to shield the connectors. Again, this is somewhat of an unorthodox way of doing a repair on these power adapters, but it makes a sturdy bond, and I've done it a few times in the past with no problem. So make sure you get your heat shrink tubing through your wire before you do any soldering to the actual adapter plug. Otherwise, it would be too late. Okay, so let's get some solder on the end of those leads there. Also, again, this is the way I like to solder. I like to tin things with the solder before I actually solder them. And I'm just globbing some solder onto the end of that lead there. And I'm doing the same thing just on the end for the ground wire. Now, the adapter plug and these leads both have solder on them. Now, what I like to do now is just stick them together, heat them up, and let the solder melt into each other. I need to make sure that which wire is which on the adapter plug, which one is ground and which one is positive. So I'm using my voltmeter to test that. I'm just holding a lead to the outside of the tip and then testing which lead's positive and negative. And once I know that, I'm going to be able to solder that ground tip to the ground wire. Just want to test it there. See, I'm touching the ground wire to the outside of the tip, and I'm touching the positive to the inside of the tip. I've heard a beep on both of those. You can't hear it because the clip is muted, but we heard the beep on both of those, so we know that the connection was proper. Or at least we heard the beep on the ground one. We didn't solder the positive one yet. The ground wire is the unshielded one. Now we're soldering the positive. Now, since I tinned both sides, all I have to do is heat it up, let the solder melt into each other, and it's a done deal. I'm going to show you here a close-up of what exactly I did, if the camera decides to focus. There we go. Get the idea? Now I'm going to take some electrical tape and shield some of the wire before I put the heat shrink tubing over it. There we go. This is good to do just in case the heat shrink tubing gets worn down a little bit. You don't want any bare wires exposed. So now I'm going to pull that heat shrink tubing up over the connector. And so far, so good. Now, the way to melt heat shrink tubing properly is with a hot air gun. I've used a lighter my whole life. It's just the way I do it. Some people might criticize it as not making an even heat connection. It's going to be a little lumpy, but it does the job fast. It doesn't smell that great. Try not to inhale those fumes. I think I have my dad to blame for showing me how to do it with a lighter. We never used a heat gun in my house for heat shrink tubing, but that would probably be the best way to do it. You'll get a more even bond. It'll melt evenly into the wire. And as you'll see what happened, it shrunk. And it shrunk around the wire, and it's forming a really hard plasticky type of bond now. Now, I like to put this thick one over just to cover the edge of the adapter plug, because if I didn't, you would start to see some bare wires showing as the more the power adapter got used. And this is a little out of the frame. Sorry about that, guys. You'll see the finished product, though. Sometimes I get too into what I'm doing and I forget that it's on the camera. Again, if you can help it and you want to use a heat gun, go for it. And you just want to make sure everything's melted evenly. It's not going to be the prettiest thing in the world when this is done, but it'll be solid. It'll work, and most of the time that's what the customer wants. I got a little fan there I used to cool it down quickly. And we're going to hit it one more blast here, I think. Get it all melted evenly. Here's another trick. You could use the barrel of your soldering iron. I think my little lighter actually ran out of fluid. You could use the barrel of your soldering iron and just kind of paint the heat shrink tubing as it melts. Try to be as even as you can. Don't let it sit there for too long of a time on a specific piece. This is another thing I might be getting criticized about, but hey, it works. I do what works. You know, Eddie Van Halen never took a guitar lesson, and he's one of the best guitar players in the world, so sometimes unorthodox techniques work all right. And again, we're going to cool that. Oops. It's not the best fan in the world. I can't tell you the number of times that blade actually popped off like that. Okay, it's a little lumpy, but it's not too bad. And that is a solid connection. As long as you sand or scuff up the leads before you solder them and make sure it's making a strong solder connection, you're going to be okay and you're not going to get returns on these. You also might be thinking, this is taking a long time. Is it really worth it to do this? Well, it depends. It's up to you to decide that. Now, I've got the voltmeter on. I'm touching the black to the outside, positive the inside. We should be getting 19 volts out of this. And there we go. 19 volts. Remember, do not touch those two leads together as they're touching the power adapter. You don't want to create a short circuit. So we're good to go. There's the finished product. Not too shabby. It has character. I'm just going to make sure no bare wires are being exposed. Do a little couple finishing touches here. And now it's time for the moment of truth. Always make sure before you actually test these in the computer that you test them with your voltmeter first and determine there's no short circuit. Okay, we're going to plug that in. And we're getting the purple light showing the battery is charging. So the adapter's working good. Battery light went out when we removed the adapter. Let's plug it back in. Battery light goes on again. Jiggle it around, make sure that the battery light stays on and it continues to get power. And that's a done deal.